Xenoblade Chronicles was something I never had any interest in at all. I pretty much learned about the game through Smash Bros, but never looked up anything beyond that. Then Xenoblade Chronicles X came out, and I didn't care, and a few years after that, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 came out, and once again, I didn't care. But I randomly watched some late game cutscenes and listened to the OST, and on a whim, I bought the game. Except, I didn't just buy the game, no, I got the Collector's Edition and the Pro Controller. I was already considering collecting the special Switch controllers, but I still can't tell you why I decided to pay extra for the Collector's Edition of the game. But that doesn't matter now, since Xenoblade 2 is one of my favorite video games of all time, and today I'll be giving you a look through the story and gameplay of this wonderful game. So let's start with the art style, since that's the first thing you really get to see. I don't watch anime at all, and to be honest, the art style was a turnoff for me for a long time. I don't think it's so much of the art style, but the tropes that go with it, and this game does follow a bunch of anime cliches, but the deeper into the game you get, the less this becomes an issue for me, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I'm going to leave out a lot of details because I've got a 30-hour playthrough plus 13 hours of cutscenes to get through, so expect to see a lot of stuff left out. But it's all good, since if you're going to play the game after watching this, you'll get to experience them on your own first and with better context. That being said, I'll be spoiling deaths and junk all the way to the final boss, so let's get right into Chapter 1. The game starts by introducing our protagonist, a salvager boy named Rex, who lives on a small titan that acts as his home and role model. In this world, titans are beasts of varying sizes that people and animals live on, and they all roam around a sea covered in clouds, circling a massive tree. I really like this world since it's bizarre but still very easy to understand, especially since there's lore behind the world being filled with these titans, but I'll tell you why it's like this when we get to that part of the story, which is towards the end of the game. So after finding some treasure under the Cloud Sea, Rex heads to Argentum where he can sell the gubs. While there, Rex gets told about a job offer where the people hiring try to kill him, yet the young lad still accepts because he's a gold digger. Remember when I said they try to kill him? Well, teleport's behind you.
Don't take it personally.
They go and do it anyways. The treasure these fine folks were seeking Rex's assistance with is a girl with some big bazonkers. And Jin here, being the absolute king he is, wants them all for himself. Also, there's a sword here, don't worry about that. Don't you worry! So somehow after he died, Rex and this girl are together in a field now. The logic of this location never made sense to me, but you know it's a lucid dream because Pyra asked my guy Rex to
place your hand on my chest.
Absolutely clop her tits, and the force of the slap brings both of them back to life. And then we find out this guy knows Pyra. Kinda awkward, but we ain't judging. Oh, and then she Naruto runs a few times. Sorry if you wanted me to discuss the story in depth, I gotta grind through these cutscenes in a serving-sized video, and I still have to talk about the gameplay, but you'll have to wait for that because the combat is super simple right now, and it gets way more complicated after a few hours. Okay, so remember when I said I loved this game? Well, it's really hard to recommend for a few reasons, and Pyra's fat fucking tits are one of them. They're so huge, and I feel like I had to play this game in private because I'm afraid people will think I'm watching some weird fetish video if they see any cutscenes. And then the game has the audacity to remind you how big they are by constantly shoving them in your face. In this Christian house, it's no bust or bust. Wait, so right now the plot is to get to this massive tree in the center of the world that nobody seems to travel to for unknown reasons. I mean, there was a war 500 years ago because someone went there, and there's this overlying issue with limited land to live on, and allegedly there's land in the tree, and not one person seems to understand this other than Rex. So all of our heroes are now on the Gormott Titan after the Naruto run scene. Did I really skip that part? Okay, so we got Rex, Pyra, Nia, Dromark, and Gramps. Oh wait, Gramps died, but he's all good now. And this is the part of the game where you get a massive overworld to run around and fight enemies in, or you can be like me and just run to the next town because the combat isn't good yet. All I'll say right now is that Rex and Nia are drivers, and Pyra and Dromark are blades, and characters work together in pairs, and we need a third pair because right now we're weak. So the Fire Emblem Three Houses kiddos reach Torgoth so Rex can learn that blade people are born from these rocks called core crystals, and as a game mechanic, these things are annoying to deal with. When you use a core crystal, you unlock a blade to pair with that character, but it's this shitty gacha system where there's a few really good blades you can get, but they're rare, and then certain blades go really well with certain characters, so it's all luck if you get a blade on the right character, since you can't trade between characters without using a special item. I didn't get any rare blades until later, but the non-scripted rares I used this playthrough were Adenine? I mean the nurse from Code Lyoko, Perun, who got jiggle physics on that shit, and Boreas. I like that the random element of getting these guys makes every playthrough different, but I'd rather just pick the characters I want to use than getting mad I pulled Gorg on my tank.
Call me Gorg.
Oh, and by the way, Pyra is a special blade called the Aegis that was handmade by the architect, aka God, which is why these bozos wanted her in the first place, and you can tell that she's the Aegis because of her emerald core crystal.
Emerald is green, like this.
Oh, green! I get it now.
Silence!
Now's a good time to talk about the cutscenes, because these things can get cringy. I'd compare them to the cutscenes from the Sonic Adventure games, which are in the so bad they're good category, but with Xenoblade 2, I'd say they're tough to get through if you watch just one, but as a whole, the story they tell is very good. So I'll be making sure to show some of my favorite cringy scenes as we move along. And speaking of which, here's the worst cutscene in the game.
How may I be of service, Master?
We meet Tora, who is the biggest simp in the world. He is simping so hard that he made a robot girlfriend to cure his loneliness. And then you find out he was going to dress her as a maid, but it gets worse because you find out he was making the simp bot with his dad and his grandpa. What the fuck, guys? The robot's name is Poppy, and she acts like a blade, but to upgrade her, you have to play this super hard arcade game, and I just don't think it's worth it, so I use Tora begrudgingly. So now that we have 3 characters, I'll finally talk about the combat, even though some options aren't available yet. There's 3 different types of blades each character can use: attack, healer, and tank. You can give any type of blade to your characters, but I recommend attackers on Rex and healers on Nia, since they both start with one of those blades. And Tora can only use his robot wife, so he can go to the waste bin. There's a lot going on here, so you'll constantly be looking all over the place, but it never feels like everything is happening too fast, which is great because this system is easy to learn but hard to master. Characters attack automatically, which fills up these diamonds in the bottom right, and once they're full, a special attack can be used. Then using those attacks fills up the 4th diamond, which lets your blade perform an elemental attack. 3 elemental attacks can be used in succession if they follow this chart in the top right corner, and once the 3rd attack is used, an orb of that combination's final element hovers around the enemy. These orbs can be broken for more damage by doing a chain attack when the 3 bars in the top left corner are all full. Chain attacks are really important for beating enemies before they hit rage and use lethal attacks, but you don't learn them until chapter 3. And I thought the tutorial wasn't great because those 3 bars you use also act as revives, and I thought the health was more important than the damage, but that's because you usually want to get 3 or 4 orbs to make a chain attack worth using, and the tutorial just kind of gives you 1, and you can add more if you want, but they don't really do a good job at telling you that. Luck also plays a key role in the fights, and it's so prevalent that it's really hard to learn from your failures because you can do the same fight twice and lose immediately one time and succeed the second. Some of the luck can be mitigated by grinding experience and doing side quests, but I'd rather lose to a boss for an hour and think the game is bullshit instead of leveling up like any person who respects themselves would do. There's a few other things in combat like driver combos and fusion combos which you can't really use yet, and items like ox cords and accessories that add small buffs to your characters, but they're things you can mess around with, so I'll cover a few of them as they became relevant to my playthrough.
Take this! Yeah!
You're getting predictable, boy.
So how does chapter 2 end? Well, it really has no bearing on the plot, but we meet Morag. She's another person who wants Pyra, but I'll talk about her when she becomes more relevant. And then Rex and the gang run away from her, and Pyra really thinks she can flirt with my guy while he's underage.
I don't have a knife.
The nerve of some people. Scooch your ass back! Then the next day they all get a boat and head to the World Tree, but uh-oh, there's a big robot guarding it, and then the sea stops here for some reason, and they get vored by another titan, Uriah. This place is pretty cool looking, especially for a swamp level, and we meet Vandham, who joins the team. He's a big, strong guy. He dies in this chapter. I warned you, there would be spoilers. He wasn't worth using anyway since he's an attacker like Rex, so into the waste bin he goes. And we also meet Zeke, who's this comic relief bandit that appears a few times, and these cutscenes are absolute gold. This first run-in with him is probably my favorite cutscene in the game. I'll just play some of it for you.
Get a load of this. Our beloved mascot, Tartars! Reveal yourself! Tartars? 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 Where are you, boy? Tartars! Handling a man's turtle.
I haven't really talked about the overworld much. They're more fun to run around if you do side quests, because all the enemies early on are either too strong or they don't give a lot of experience back, so I usually run past any who aggro on me. The reason I mention this now is because there's a few sections where the path you need to take is full of enemies who will beat you if you try and fight them, so you just have to run past them and hope they don't use a strong attack or are slow enough that you can run away to get your health back. So there's this Lycaonia drain to get to the next city, but the path is full of these reptiles that run away and get reinforcements when their health gets low, and the reinforcements always kill me. It's barely, and I mean barely, possible to sneak by them if you walk right on the edge of the cliff when they're not looking. And for as simple as it is, this is one of the toughest overworld sections to get through in my opinion. And let's follow a tough section with a tough boss fight, because the end boss of chapter 3 was the most difficult fight for me in this playthrough. You fight Malos, the end boss from the first chapter, and Akos, some dork who showed up before you fight Zeke.
Akos is the meanest son of a bitch I know.
I can't exactly pinpoint why this fight is so tough. Maybe these guys have fatter stats for their level compared to other bosses, but this is the first time in my original playthrough where I felt like I was doing something wrong, because I'd always die before I could take even a quarter of the health on either of them. But thankfully, you only have to take away half of the health on one of them before this sick cutscene plays and the fight gets easier. And this cutscene, oh boy.
So long, kid.
In terms of a reward for completing a challenge, this is one of the best in the game because there's this badass fight scene where Pyra transforms into this girl named Mithra, who can allow Rex to see a few seconds into the future, and then you get to finish the fight with her, and somehow Malos and Akos become total pushovers, and then the scene continues and Vandam gets killed in the aftermath. And from this point on, we can use Mithra, who has better stats than Pyra, so into the waste bin for Pyra. I personally think that if you have the opportunity to play Xenoblade 2, that this is the point you should play until before deciding if you want to play until the end, because by this point you should have a good enough understanding of the combat, and the story starts to pick up here. So if either of those two are keeping you interested in the game by the end of the chapter, then it's worth continuing, but if they aren't, then it's a good point to stop playing. I know it's a hard sell since it takes about 15 hours to get this far on a blind playthrough, but this is the best point to make that decision. And if you decide to keep playing, you get to play the worst chapter in the game. So after Van Hem's death, Rex somehow inherits everything from him, including his blade and job. This side mode called Merc Missions becomes available, which are essentially side quests you don't have to do anything to accomplish, except they force you to do one later that takes 30 minutes to finish before you can keep playing, and it kills all momentum for no reason at all. But before that happens, Van Dam's blade gets stolen and he has to backtrack to Gormott, and it's a total mess that drags on forever. Then Pyra drinks tea.
The tea here is lovely.
And after that, you get to travel to Mor Ardain, a desert titan, and the whole chapter is about Tora finding his dad after he left to get some ciggies and never came back. Then you chase another simp bot and go to a factory and find out his dad was abducted and is being forced to make more simp bots. This video is gonna age horribly. Then they have this section where you can't use Tora and you keep dying, and I hate it because it takes 4 minutes to get to the part you died at just so you can die again. Suck my balls. Then after that part you get Tora back and Poppy gets an upgrade, but it becomes totally useless because that Lady Morrig from before becomes playable now, and unlike Tora, she can use blades. Morrig's pretty cool, I wouldn't mind her destroying my pelvis. She's the well-needed straight man of the group who really doesn't break character at all, and she'll jump in and out of the party occasionally, but she's playable 95% of the time from here. So we fight Discount Jesse and James from Team Rocket and make our way to Leftheria, which is where Rex is from. Baby Rex. Then we go to Indal, which is like the Vatican, but the Pope is actually evil here. I mean, look how pointy he is. It's character design 101 to make evil people pointy. And they tell you he's the driver of Malos, who's also an Aegis. Kinda left that part out, didn't I? Yeah, he's kinda boring right now, but he'll be important in a few chapters. So there's been this war subplot happening for a while. I don't really care about it since it doesn't amount to anything. It just kinda adds a false tension, so I'm gonna skip it. I mean, it's kinda important because we find out Jin is a blade, and he talks like Marcus from Detroit Become Human.
You are no slave. Be free now.
You are free.
But I want to talk about this game's music because the next Titan has the best song in the game, and I gotta say, Xenoblade 2 has one of my favorite soundtracks ever. Every single place you go to absolutely slaps. I listened to a few songs before I bought this game, and honestly, I think that counts for 70% of the reason I bought it. I also relearned that moving after the first auto attack is super efficient during combat, and I started using pouch items at this point in my playthrough. So I don't know how much easier that made the game for me, but it's really the best way to play now that I've gone and done it. There's a ton of items you can use that give minor stat boosts, but desserts are the way to go because they let you use arts quicker, which means you can use everything else faster. Zeke has joined our team by this point. That was back in chapter 5, but he's relevant here because he's a crown prince on this Titan, but like everyone in the game, he's got daddy issues. And his daddy takes Pyra so she can T-pose for him like the absolute sicko he is. Then we go to this cave, and there's another cool, calm, and collection of cutscenes just like in chapter 3, except the boss fights aren't nearly as difficult. Jin reveals his true form! And oh no, he's hot! Then Pyra lets them take her in exchange for not killing everyone, and this scene kinda sucks in retrospect, because one chapter later, she reveals that she wanted to go to the World Tree to ask God to kill her, even though she threatens to kill herself right here. Also, Jin is like, you let your blade get hurt. Bro, you did that! So now that Pyra is gone and Jin is too strong, the only thing left to do is go in a cave and find a third sword, which is literally pulled out of the game's ass. You can't tell me Pyra's got a third bitch hidden in there. And this part never sat right with me because the sword is from the war 500 years earlier, implying there's a third form, but in the expansion pass, the third form isn't even there, but fuck it. This cave kinda sucks as a dungeon because you can't chain elements together unless you use Tora, but Tora is already in the wasteland, so I'm not digging him out. And through the hardships of going through the cave, Nia reveals she's a flesh eater like Jin. Oh yeah, Jin's a flesh eater. Basically, flesh eaters are blades who eat the heart of the person that resonated them, which sometimes, aka always, gives the blade more power, but now they become mortals. And this scene where Nia makes her big reveal, which was super obvious, happens, and here it is guys, the best quote in the game.
I love you, Rex.
Nia, I love you too. I love you and all you guys.
Then the sword disintegrates, but it's fine because the real third sword were the friends we made along the way. So we go ahead and try and save Pyra anyways. Oh no, I can't climb this wall because Poppy needs me to buy her a Toraganda. Do you know the way? This chapter is full of these types of roadblocks where you have to use your blade skills or make sure you have 3 wind blades in your party, and it's really unnecessary because if you don't have the right blades or stats, you have to backtrack to get them. But it's all worth it in the end because up next is another challenging boss with a satisfying cutscene. No, not the one where Nia inflates Malos. I'm talking about the one where we find Pyra and fight Malos and Jin at the same time, and it's just like the chapter 3 end boss, but slightly less challenging. I wound up buying these anti-shackle accessories that are available in chapter 3, and they probably make that fight much easier, but I won the first time I used them for this fight, but it also could have been a coincidence. And like the chapter 3 fight, you only need to knock down half of the health of either Jin or Malos. Then in the cutscene, Rex somehow gets Pyra to wake up after Malos drained all of her memories, and this unlocks Numa, who was the real waifu of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, alright? They say your game is only as good as your best girl, so you know it's a bomb-ass game. I mean, her personality is literally a combination of Pyra and Mythra's personalities, meaning she has no personality, but I stan anyways. So now we're on even footing against Jin, but oh no, the ground broke and now we're below the Cloud Sea, which doesn't make any sense, but I'm not gonna fight this one because I can finally talk about some lore. This is Morytha, which looks like a destroyed city from our world, and that's because it is. Back when we met the Pope, there was this mural illustrating the creation of the world, but it wasn't so much the creation of Alrest as much as it was the hiding of the last world. And the game starts to spread this message that human hubris is the most destructive thing to civilization. I would have said sentience, but hubris is probably top 5. Most of the enemies you fight here are mutated humans who have been living since the creation of Alrest, and it all makes you wonder how this world got the way it was, which will be revealed in the final chapter, but first we have to climb the World Tree, which isn't actually a tree, but a massive skyscraper. Space scraper? And it's full of functioning robots guarding the place. You just have to keep climbing, and some of these areas are shitty, like there's this button you need to press, but the enemy guarding it calls in for help, and you'll die trying to fight them, so you have to sneak behind them and press the button right before they aggro. And this section where there's a giant robot blocking the way, but luckily there's a ladder behind it, and for whatever reason, ladders deactivate all aggro. And here's a part where there's giant robots guarding an elevator, and if you cut this corner, it prevents one from spawning, which lets you get by easily. Halfway up the tree, the Pope joins the server and officially reveals he has God Complex, and even though it's the best complex to have, he wants to destroy the world. There's a few cutscenes where Amalthus, that's his name, is younger and sees how awful people are, and I guess he hates himself? Kind of a hefty assumption, but that's what Rex and the boys be saying about him behind his back. Then the game decides to block me from going through this door because Mythra hasn't talked to enough people. I'm sorry, what? Well, geez, I could fly back to Argentum and talk to some people, or I could clip through the door like a fucking champ. And now we get to fight Jin, who's been weakened after our last fight with him. You wouldn't really know because the game never focused on it, but Jin and Malos are supposed to be bros for life. Thankfully, this cutscene was made to highlight it. Bro. What, bro? Tell the whole world we're bros. We're bros. Why do you whisper, bro? Because you're my whole world, bro. Bro. So we kicked Jin's shit in. This is actually another tough boss fight, but I didn't have too much trouble this time around because I understood how to utilize Numa, who is busted. And after this fight, Space Pope joins the server, but he's got big dick energy this time with the divine fidget spinner robes. I thought this fight was tougher than Jin's the first time around because his 1,000 Tentacles attack always killed Rex, but for some reason that wasn't an issue this time and I bodied him on my first attempt. It's possible to dunk the Pope in the hole he came from, but I'm not that good. Alas, no waste spin for the Space Pope. Also, Jin, Space Pope, Mikhail, Akos, and Petroka die around this point. I feel like I need to address that because it would be weird if I didn't when Malice is the only person left to kill. So we're at the final chapter now, and that means we'll finally reach Elysium, which is the place Rex slapped Pyra's tits at, by the way. It's supposed to look like this, but we got catfish. I mean, it's a really good twist, but all it makes you think is, what am I fighting for? Because this was the end goal for Rex and Pyra, but now we have to stop Malice instead, and then what? Well, fuck man, we'll find out soon, but first we have to talk to Daddy Deer, the one, the only, the architect. He kinda drops a ton of lore like how he's solely responsible for the world being this way. We'll just give him a slap on the wrist, cause he made Numa. And all that stands in our way is Malice, and all I gotta say about this opening cutscene is how the tone of the English dub does not match the cutscene very well.
This whole world is a wretched place.
If it wasn't apparent by now, the animation is meant to match the Japanese dialogue, but this was never a problem for me. You can download the Japanese dub for free, if you're weeb trash that is. Real men listen to the English dub while reading the English sub. It's how we do. And this boss fight was really tough for me the first time around, and I think it still would be if I didn't know about exploits. For starters, Malice does this attack that pretty much kills everyone, but you can use a chain attack when he does it, which lets you avoid getting hurt. And if you stay in the left inner corner, you can hit him while he's hiding in the back for some reason. I didn't really need to use this exploit because of the dessert strats, but if you ever play this game after watching the video, this is the attack if you're struggling. And even though this was the final boss, there's still 30 minutes of cutscenes to get through because we gotta wrap up the story by having Numa sacrifice herself. I could have mentioned this earlier, but in Chapter 8 you get to decide if Rex calls this form Pyra or Mythra. Mythra's the correct answer, but I can understand why people would pick Pyra, since she's the girl Rex fell in love with. But hear me out on this. Mythra was the original, and Mythra's better, but I'm gonna call her Numa anyways. So after killing Malice, the space scraper is gonna break, and Numa decides to sacrifice herself to save Rex, even though Rex wants to die with her, and everyone starts to give him this pep talk about growing up. But it's supposed to be this beautiful scene that tugs at your heart, but I'm kind of apathetic, so instead I was busy thinking about how the bridge broke in the same way the bridge in the Sonic Adventure 2 level breaks. For real though, this guy's death is sadder than this entire scene, and that's from an optional side quest. And the sacrifice doesn't even matter because Pyra and Mythra come back in the post-credits scene. But before that, when our heroes escape and Gramps turns big after Numa touched his thingy, we find out all the Titans are missing and the Cloud Sea's disappearing. But after going through a rift or something, they pass an ocean where all the Titans start to collide into the land, and thematically, it's a great end, but then you realize how quick these guys are going to run into incest if they're the only people alive on this world. It could be possible people are alive on the other Titans, but Malice had robots going ham on them all, plus the impact of the Titan colliding into the land, so I'll make the educated guess that it
Seems the Praetor has as much clout around here as ever.
So that's Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Like I said, I think it's really worth trying now. You don't need to play the first game to understand this game's story at all, but there are a lot of flaws as I've highlighted. It's kind of cringy, it's kind of fan servicey, the combat takes forever to get into, the overworlds can be tough to get through, and the gacha system can be annoying. But as a whole experience, this game surprised me so much. I had no interest in Xenoblade the day this game released, and I gave it a chance, and this has become one of my favorite games of all time. The good outweighs so much of the bad. Plus, if you check out the game or the cutscenes, there's a lot of plot points I had to leave out, and I think they'll impress you if you watch them. And one last thing to note is that the game got an expansion pass, including a prequel explaining the events and character dynamics from the Aegis War 500 years earlier that the game constantly mentions. Hopefully I'll get around to talking about it in a future video, but for now, that's all I've got to say about Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a like as well as the channel grow and subscribe to get updates on my uploads as soon as they happen, but until then, I will see you all next time.